whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, a true legend and the family's captain. Tributes flow for a Waikato father of three who died in the Enchanter fishing boat disaster. What caused a China Eastern Boeing 737 to nosedive into the ground, believed to have killed all on board? Boosting the booster, some people could be asked to roll up their sleeves for a fourth COVID jab. Public health experts call for tighter COVID controls on the eve of the Prime Minister's announcement on the future of mandates and passes. And enough already, it's been dubbed Deltacron. We find out more about the new mashup of two corona strains and who doesn't need a dose of extreme cuteness in their day. Auckland Zoo's got a new baby orangutan.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. Ahi Marie ko Aviation tēnei. A father who died in the Enchanter boat tragedy off North Cape is being remembered as a family man who loved his three children. The fishing charter vessel was hit by a rogue wave and sank on Sunday night. 5 people were rescued, including the skipper, but Te Awamutu builder Mark Sanders was one of 4 who died. His eldest daughter, Reese, says there were many things he loved doing.
He loved us so much. He would do anything for us. He loved his rugby, loved fishing, obviously. That was like the trip of his lifetime. He was taken doing what he loved. At least that's a positive. He was having the time of his life, and when we talked to him, he was so happy.
You can hear more from the Sanders children on Checkpoint shortly. Police divers are checking the wreck of Enchanter for the sole person who remains missing. They're checking whether the search can be done in place or if the boat needs to be towed to shallower water. The Director General of Health is telling New Zealanders they must prepare for more Omicron waves and new variants. But Dr Ashley Bloomfield says the current Omicron outbreak has now peaked in Metro Auckland and is slowing down at other Auckland DHBs. He says it's also slowly declining in the rest of the country.
So in the 7 days to the 20th of March, case numbers nationally, and we've taken Auckland out of this, increased by just 1%, compared to a 44% increase in the 7 days up to the 13th of March.
However, Dr Bloomfield is warning New Zealanders the pandemic's far from over. 15 people are reported to have died today with COVID, bringing the number of deaths to 199. There are nearly 21,000 new community cases today and just over 1,000 people in hospital. Russia says more than 62,000 Mariupol residents have been evacuated to Russia amid heavy fighting. But Mariupol says the residents were taken against their will. A Ukrainian officer says bombs are falling every 10 minutes in the key port city. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says there's no question of surrender after the city passed a Russian deadline to give up in exchange for safe passage for people trapped in the city. Mr. Zelensky says he's open to direct talks with Vladimir Putin. The head of the Mental Health Foundation says he would have been shocked if a new report didn't find major problems with mental health services. The Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission has found long wait times for specialist support, more prescriptions being handed out for antidepressants, and more Māori being put into solitary confinement. Sean Robinson says it's a sign that the $1.9 billion the government set aside in 2019 to transform services just wasn't enough.
I think the government is only just really comprehending the size of the issue, and if they continue to say that $1.9 billion is enough to sort this out, then I'm sorry, but I cannot agree with them.
Sean Robinson says looming right behind the COVID-19 pandemic is an ongoing mental health crisis. Met Service is warning the Bay of Plenty and Gisborne regions of very heavy rainfall and thunderstorms starting overnight and all through tomorrow. Both regions are likely to get over 200 millimetres of rain and possible torrential levels of 45 millimetres an hour. Forecaster Ashley Parks says the amount of rain could cause problems.
There is the potential for significant flooding, flash flooding, slips, as well as rapidly rising rivers and dangerous river conditions.
Ashley Parks says the rain could continue into Thursday and Friday in Gisborne. A man who was shot by police near Invercargill last weekend is facing a number of charges. The 45-year-old remains in hospital in a stable condition. He's appeared in court by audio-visual link on charges including assault with intent to rob, intentional damage and possession of an offensive weapon. Police say the man rammed one of their cars and confronted members of the public with a gun and officers with a knife. To sport, and the player who Chris Wood has replaced at the top of the All Whites all-time goal-scoring list says it was inevitable the record would be broken. The Newcastle United striker scored twice in New Zealand's 4-0 win over Fiji at the Oceania World Cup qualifiers, surpassing Vaughan Coveney's previous 29 goals. Coveney is ecstatic it was Wood who broke the record.
It's a great honour and it's a great achievement at the time, but records are there, can be for a short time, for a long time. They're there to be broken, and for Chris to do that achievement the way he's done it and where he's played, credit to himself.
The All Whites play New Caledonia on Friday. The young Warriors star, Reece Walsh, says suggestions he may make a shock early exit from the NRL side are pure speculation. Australian media reports last month said the 19-year-old is feeling uneasy and unsettled at the New Zealand club. But Walsh, who is in year 2 of a 3-year contract, says he's staying very much in the present.
They're always going to talk about what can happen and what's going to happen, and they always think they're getting the first story and that, but I'm not really even looking past next week. I'm taking it one step at a time, and I've only just started playing footy again, and I haven't even thought about what's going to happen next year or the year after.
And Russian chess grandmaster Sergei Karyakin has been banned from competition for 6 months because of his support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's the news.
A tragedy at sea.
I said, good luck, Mark, have a good trip. And that's the last time I spoke to him.
A near tragedy in Auckland's floodwaters.
I thought she was dead for the time, but then I lay her in the recovery position and I thought that she was actually breathing.
And war intensifies.
They are not willing to give up their territory, their people, their land to foreign invaders.
Telling the tough stories. Morning reports every weekday from 6 till 9 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen next. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, a few showers, some possibly heavy and thundery at times. Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Gisborne, cloudy with showers but rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in Gisborne, spreading elsewhere this evening. From Waikato to Taranaki, including Taumarunui, cloudy periods and a few showers, possible thunderstorms for Taranaki and the west coast. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, also Whanganui and from Taihape to Wellington. Partly cloudy with scattered showers mainly about the ranges. A few showers tomorrow but rain with heavy falls for Hawke's Bay. Scattered rain is forecast for Nelson, heavy and thundery at times, easing tomorrow evening. Marlborough, Buller and Westland, scattered showers in the north, developing elsewhere this afternoon. Canterbury, Otago, Southland and Fiordland, low cloud and patchy drizzle in the east, but fine in the south and west. Scattered showers during the afternoons and evenings, mainly inland. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, often cloudy. It's 7 minutes past 5. We'll have news headlines for you at 5:30.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A true legend, that's how a Waikato father is being described by his family after he died in the Enchanter sinking off North Cape. Mark Sanders was one of 4 fathers who died. His 3 children told Checkpoint they're grateful they spoke to their dad one last time before disaster struck on Sunday night. Mark's dad, Graham, says the family's lost its captain. Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Munro have this story from Te Awamutu.
Reece Sanders manages a laugh as she recalls her father's jokes. A classic dad joke, more embarrassing than funny, but the kind she'll miss most now her dad, Mark Sanders, is no longer around.
Just the laughs. He was the funniest person ever, and no matter even how dry the joke was, he would still laugh at it. He'd laugh at his own jokes and it'd just make it funny. He was just the funniest guy, and that's what I'll miss the most, I think. Just all the jokes, all the good memories with him. He was amazing.
The Te Awamutu father leaves behind 3 children, Reece, Sienna and Ali, as well as wife Megan. Talking for the first time since her father's death, Reese, Mark's eldest daughter, into her final year of high school, remembers a man with many loves: fishing, rugby, family.
He was taken doing what he loved, at least that, that's a positive. He was having the time of his life, and when we talked to him, he was so happy. And I remember before he went on the trip, he was so excited about it, and he was taking me downstairs to show me all of the stuff that he was taking. He was so happy, and I have a little video of him. It was really nice. I can't stop watching it. But yeah, definitely gonna miss him. He was amazing. He'd do anything for us. Yeah.
Reese got to speak with her father one last time before receiving the heartbreaking news that he wouldn't be coming home.
We spoke to him Sunday night, just maybe 2 hours before the whole EPIRB and stuff went off, I think. But yeah, he was so happy when we talked to him. Yeah, it was so good because he didn't have coverage the whole time, pretty much. So that was the first time we actually got to talk to him. So yeah, it was good timing, I guess, that we get to talk to him that last time.
Reese's sister Sienna sums up her father in a couple of words.
He was just always there for us, always wanting to do what's best for us and supporting us with all our sports. And yeah, he was just a true legend.
True legend, those two words joining others like fine young man, family man, champion on the street and online, as people here come to terms with what's happened.
Just a good bugger. Yeah. Good guy and good sportsman, great family man. Always helped with the horses. He enjoyed the races. He trained with me for a couple of years and was very good at it. And he's a good builder. He was a good finisher at his work and did it really well. And most of all, he was not only a son, he was my mate.
This is Graham Sanders, Mark's father, who's lost his youngest boy. He last saw Mark on Wednesday morning when he showed up home to say goodbye before heading away. Graham shook his son's hand and wished Mark good luck. He knew he'd been looking forward to the trip.
The only concern was the last couple of days of the weather. He was going to, after I came back, he's going to go and see a cousin of mine that lives at Hohora, Croydon and Diane Thompson. He wanted to go and see them. And then I had to ring them and tell them that he won't be coming.
Graham understands the Enchanter was heading home early when disaster struck. He says his son loved fishing and loved the sea.
I told him that when we got a boat, you're in charge and everyone's got to do as they're told, including me. He told me off one day. He said, "Dad, you're being an idiot." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You've had too much to drink, you're being an idiot." I said, "Hang on a minute. I own this boat." And he turned around and said to me, "You told me I'm the boss." So I backed down and said, "OK, mate."
Santa's youngest and only son, Ali, is still in intermediate school. He's in the boat when we arrive, untangling tackle, making sure things are in order. His memories of adventures with his father front of mind.
The last big trip I went on was we stayed down Paratoka together. It's at a car fair. And yeah, we had a real good time. It was real fun. And yeah.
Sanders is one of 4 Waikato fathers taken in this tragedy. His passings left a hole in Te Awamutu. The local builder and horse trainer's name is well known in these parts. A Te Awamutu Sports Rugby Club write-up celebrates one of its fine centurions, Mark Sanders, humble, true, loyal.
And if you were listening to that on radio, we'll put the video from our two nicks up on our webpage. Do check it out. The skipper of the fishing charter, which sank off Northland's coast, is said to be in complete shock over the incident, which has so far claimed 4 lives. Search and rescue teams are still scouring the coast near Cape Reinga for one person who is still missing. But with police divers now combing through the ship's wreckage, hopes of finding them alive are fading. Nita Blake-Person reports from the far north.
Mangonui's famous fishing wharf was quiet today with a bunch of flowers, a visible reminder of the lives lost after they set off from here last Thursday. Harbour Warden Steve Smith says the town is devastated.
I was speaking with a lady today who actually served them breakfast on the morning of their departure, and the whole 8 of them were in very, very good, cheerful spirits, looking forward to it. And that's the sort of thing that they are. It's just involves the whole community, and that is why we're also badly affected. It's a very, very somber mood up here at the moment.
Rescue teams are still searching for one person unaccounted for after the trip. 4 bodies have been recovered and 5 people were pulled from the water alive, including skipper Lance Goodhue and crew member Kobe O'Neill. Steve Smith says he's giving them space, but those who've been in touch say they're still coming to terms with what's happened.
And I think the word would be, especially with Lance, shell-shocked. And that is why we're trying to give them as much space as they can.
The survivors were in the water for 4 hours, some clinging to parts of the broken and battered ship Enchanter before they were rescued. Smith says it's been harrowing for rescuers too, who've also recovered bodies.
A rescue like this is anguishing. I mean, I know, for instance, Reese from the Pacific Invader, I think he was on at the time, he's been through this before down at Wakatani, and it's horrific pulling out those sort of things out of the water. Even just searching for it, because I know they searched at night with the Orion dropping down flares and crews going to investigate that. It is just devastating for those people being involved, but it's got to be done.
Lance Goodhue ran 3 boats through his fishing charter company. Trips have been suspended for the time being. Nathan Cleveland from Wanganui was supposed to be on one tonight. He'd been planning his trip to the Three Kings with 5 friends for over a year. With just a few days between their trip and the previous group, it's been extremely confronting.
Yeah, it's very, very close to home. Actually, just as you rung, I was just watching the helicopter plucking them out of the water. I'm still getting goosebumps now.
He says the Enchanter was well known in the fishing community.
You're targeting the big fish, you're targeting, just everything you could hope for. And with the marlin as well, it is. It's just a dream trip.
The group's pledged to rebook in the future to show their support. Further north today, helicopters came and went from the Rescue Coordination Centre near Te Pua in the far north. Search Mission Coordinator Nick Burt says today's search has been a huge effort.
Today we've had 4 helicopters up there, including the Westpac Rescue helicopter from Auckland. We've had the Coast Guard Air Patrol involved. We've had 3 commercial fishing vessels assisting. We've got police both on the ground and the National Dive Squad out on the water. And we have a Coast Guard vessel out of Hohora as well.
While there's no sign of the missing person, the dive squad have located the Enchanter and will search it shortly.
So it's moved drifted south approximately 7 nautical miles from its last known position from last night. We know that the vessel is semi-submerged, but it is still floating on the surface, and they are working to secure it so they can search the inside of the vessel.
He says they'll decide about tomorrow's search plans overnight this evening. Multiple investigations are now underway into the incident. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission and Maritime New Zealand are both looking into it, with more inquiries possible.
It is 18 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some people may soon be asked to roll up their sleeve for a 4th COVID vaccine. Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says he's taking expert advice and any decision would be up to the government. There have been 15 deaths reported today and just under 21,000 new community cases. 1,016 people are in hospital, 25 in ICU. Andrew McRae reports.
Today's death toll now brings the total number of COVID-related deaths to 199. Of the 15, 1 was in their 50s, 3 in their 60s, 6 in their 70s and 5 in their 80s. It's this group and their vulnerability to the virus that's prompting consideration of a 4th dose of the Pfizer vaccine.
Older people, people with pre-existing conditions, in particular, I'm most interested in, especially as we go into winter. But I have also asked whether the offer should be extended to other groups, and in particular I'm thinking here of the health workforce, who would be at a high risk as we go into the winter period.
Dr Bloomfield says the effectiveness of the booster shot does eventually start to wane. He says no consideration has been given at this stage for a 4th jab for the wider population. Omicron has now officially peaked in Metro Auckland and is slowing down in other Auckland AHBs and in the rest of the country.
So in the 7 days to the 20th of March, case numbers nationally, and we've taken Auckland out of this, increased by just 1% compared to a 44% increase in the 7 days up to the 13th of March.
But New Zealanders are being warned to keep their wits about them as the pandemic's far from over. Dr. Bloomfield says New Zealand must prepare for more Omicron waves and new variants.
Countries experience another surge in cases from Omicron appear to be more affected by the more transmissible Omicron BA2 subvariant. And in New Zealand, that is the vast majority of our cases at the moment. So we may not see quite the same surge.
Primary Health Lead Dr. Joe Bourne says vital medical services remain open in the community, despite many clinics having staff down with COVID.
The Ministry of Health is opening up a database that we have of people who have made themselves available for clinical and non-clinical work to help with the response, and that's been utilised through the vaccine programme to date. So we're notifying primary care providers that that's another resource that they can tap into.
People with COVID will now be able to alert health authorities directly if they don't have somewhere suitable to isolate. There's now the ability to declare a disability and flag a need for accommodation. Dr. Bourne gave the example of a woman who'd recently moved from one part of the country to another.
While she was being assessed, it was identified that she would be isolating in a car. The clinicians in that case were able to contact the local care coordination hub, who could identify a camper van which she was given access to, and she was then able to park that on a friend's property so she could isolate safely.
Ashley Bloomfield says as a country, we need to be ready for what may come next.
I think COVID will be around for good, just as I think the first reported or known reference to influenza was in about the 11th century. It's something that's been with us. COVID, like other coronaviruses, will be here to stay.
Dr. Bloomfield says the question will be what sort of impact it will have on communities and globally.
Meanwhile, a group of public health experts are calling on the government to pump the brakes on loosening COVID restrictions. Te Epidemiology Jacinda Ardern is due to make an announcement tomorrow about vaccine passes, mandates and the COVID-19 protection framework. National wants most of the restrictions gone immediately and the rest by the time Aussie tourists start arriving April 13th. In a blog, epidemiologist Professor Michael Baker and his colleagues argue now is not the time to slacken off, and in fact some of the rules need to be beefed up. And he joins us now. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
Can we start with the fact that the Director-General of Health is looking at a fourth vaccine shot for health workers? Do you think that's a good idea and should it be mandated?
Look, I think it is a good idea to have that option available. We do know that we see waning immunity, and this is particularly a problem with the Omicron variant. And this is for a very specific group of people. These are older people and people with underlying immune suppressive illness and potentially frontline workers. So it's not for everyone.
OK, well, let's look at some of the rules and restrictions currently in place and get a feel for what you think is worth keeping or beefing up. Vaccine certificates, do we keep them and for what?
Well, I think vaccine passes are going to be very useful. There's many situations where you want to have a record of your immunity status or your vaccination status. For example, visiting aged care facilities, they might say, look, we want you to have a vaccine pass or have done a recent rapid antigen test to show that you're not bringing the virus into this vulnerable community. If we think about international travel, we'll almost certainly have a requirement for travelling on, we do have a requirement for travelling on most international carriers now and for entry into many countries. So I don't think this requirement is going away anytime soon.
Do you think that people should have had a third shot, the booster, in order to obtain a pass?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, remember, this was the two-shot schedule was fine for Delta. It doesn't work so well for Omicron. It still gives you some protection against serious illness, but it doesn't protect you very much from getting symptomatic illness and passing the virus on.
So you'd like the government to boost the requirement, excuse the pun, in order to qualify for a vaccine pass to 3 vaccinations?
Yes, I mean, there's nothing unusual about that. That's currently the requirement for frontline health workers and so on. You have to get 3 doses to be considered fully vaccinated. Australia has that requirement now to be fully vaccinated. It needs 3 injections. I mean, this is not this is not something we've just dreamt up. This is just biology here. You need that. You need those 3 doses to be immune.
And would you want the third shot to be mandated then?
Well, it depends on the situation. I mean, if you want to have a valid vaccine pass, it's a bit like having a valid driver's license or one of fitness. You have to meet the current criteria. The virus will keep changing. We have to keep changing to keep ahead of it. Otherwise, we're just trailing behind and our tools are not very effective.
But you know yourself, and you listed the statistics in this blog about booster shots, right? People simply are not getting them. 73% of those who are eligible have had a third dose, and you honed in on Māori, and only 59% of them. So if a third vaccination is a requirement to get the pass, and you want to keep it to get into events and various venues, a whole bunch of people are going to be cut out of a certain part of society on an ongoing basis, aren't they?
Yeah, actually, it's a whole separate question about where the pass is required. Our argument is that if we've got these tools, they need to be valid. So they need to mean something. And so we have to keep updating them. I think it's a much wider question about the situations where you might need a vaccine pass.
Do you have thoughts on that, Professor?
Yeah,
where do you think we should still have to show this pass?
Well, I think the requirements can be relaxed, but I think some venue operators may want to have that as a requirement they can use. For example, if you're organising an indoor concert for a vulnerable older population, you might say, look, let's make this a vaccine pass event, because that's what our customers really need, to feel comfortable coming back into indoor environments. Because I think actually, if you have to choose between event size limits or mask use or vaccine passes, I think it would be quite helpful to have a discussion with the industry about which of these things do you think are most useful for making people feel safe in your particular venue.
And in terms of that, having to have a pass, would you make that based on crowd size and whether it's indoor or outdoor, as to whether it's compulsory to have had the third shot and show a pass?
Actually, I'm not certain that it should be compulsory in many environments at all, except healthcare environments. But I do think we need a tool so that when you need to limit transmission of the virus in a particular indoor environment, it's there if it's needed. And I think that this is a time to have a discussion with community groups and business sectors to say, well, you want to run safe events, which of these tools are most useful for you?
So the Prime Minister's set to make an announcement tomorrow, right? And some people will be listening to this and think they've had enough. They see Auckland has peaked. They want life to seem more normal. But what is your biggest fear here? What could we do wrong? And what would the consequences of that be?
Well, basically, we all wish the virus would go away, but it has a life of its own, as we've seen. And there's two big biological processes we can't control. One is the virus will keep mutating and it will take opportunities by becoming more infectious, not necessarily more dangerous. The other thing is that generally our immune protection wanes over time. So these are things that we have to live with. And if we look at Australia, which I think is still a good example of what we might expect in the next few months, is when we come down off this peak, you return to quite a high baseline of ongoing transmission, which would mean thousands of cases a day for the rest of the year. And you might have 200 or 300 people in hospital all the time. And that's a huge drain on our health system, limiting elective procedures and all sorts of other things. So that's the reality we should be planning for. And rather than saying, oh, let's lift all the restrictions, try and keep ahead of what we think the virus will do. And I think cautiously remove controls and try and avoid having that second peak.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That's Professor Michael Baker. Ho mai o whakaro. We'd love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Fourth jabs for health workers. That's under investigation at the moment. And do you think you should require a third shot in order to qualify for a vaccine certificate or vaccine pass? Text us, pātui mai, 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. In breaking news, a fifth body has been found in the water during the search and rescue operation off North Cape. Police say the body has been retrieved this afternoon by a vessel supporting the search operation. Search efforts have now concluded and police extend their deepest condolences to his family and friends. Officials trying to revamp the country's mental health services are being accused of being a sloth at the helm of the Titanic. But they say it's a long-term project. A report released today questions why $1.9 billion of investment in the 2019 wellbeing budget hasn't seen improvements materialise as hoped. The Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission has found long wait times for specialist support, more prescriptions being handed out for antidepressants, and more Māori being put into solitary confinement. Katie Todd reports.
From this in 2019,
mental health is no longer on the periphery of our health system. It is front and centre.
To this today.
The specialist end of the services are still under a lot of pressure, and that's an area where there hasn't been significant investment in new services.
That's the head of the Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission, Karen Osborne, who says the government's $1.9 billion wellbeing budget has improved some primary and community services. But the Commission believe it's fallen short for specialist services so far, especially for young people and kaupapa Māori. For National MP Matt Ducey, that raises one question.
You've got to ask yourself, where has all the money gone? Why is it not making a difference? And why are services harder to access? So most mental health groups on the ground tell me they can't point to where the money has gone.
Health Minister Andrew Little argues the government is on track with its promised overhaul, having reached the midpoint in a 4-year work programme. Mr Little says it's already halfway through its recruitment of frontline mental health roles, has building projects underway to improve facilities, and is now moving into work to improve specialist and acute services. He says awareness of mental wellbeing issues has grown, and so too has demand for specialist services. Mr Little appeared before media at the launch of a new 2-year campaign to hire more mental health nurses.
We always knew when we were put in place the plan in 2019 that there was a lot of stuff to do, and some of it was going to take some time to do. All the parts are coming into place now, and I'm confident about the track that we're on.
But that's not good enough, according to Victoria University clinical psychologist Dougal Sutherland.
I had hoped 3 years ago that would have started and that by now we would be saying, oh, look, we've had an increase in all these number of mental health professionals, but I've yet to see that. So I pessimistically think it'll be another 3 years at least. So what would that be, 2025? And I know it takes a long time, and I know we've had COVID, but it just seems like we're just sort of on a road to nowhere again.
Waikato woman Jane Stevens waited a year to meet with Andrew Little to discuss her concerns about mental health services after her son took his life while in DHB care. She feels mental health services have a leadership problem and says the Commission has been incredibly polite.
In the way that they've framed this, they've talked about there are opportunities for embedding leadership. Well, I'd probably say it's about bloody time.
But Chief Executive of the Mental Health Foundation, Sean Robinson, says the report is a sign the government's $1.9 billion investment wasn't enough. He says he would have been shocked if the Commission didn't find major issues with the country's mental health services.
I think the government is only just really comprehending the size of the issue, and if they continue to say that $1.9 billion is enough to sort this out, then I'm sorry, but I cannot agree with them.
Sean Robinson says looming right behind the COVID-19 pandemic is a mental health crisis that needs to be addressed.
And that was Katie Todd reporting. Kia ora e te iwi, haere ake nei e o Checkpoint. Just when you've had enough Delta and Omicron get together, we find out more about the new strain emerging. Mount Ruapehu is having another grumble, and 3 days old and heading onto the high wire, Auckland Zoo's new arrival. Ho mai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines. Anei a iwi, mina pita pita kōrero.
A fifth body has been found in the water during the search and rescue operation off North Cape. Police divers have been checking the wreck of the Enchanter, which sank on Sunday, for the missing person. 5 people survived the tragedy. Meanwhile, the daughter of one of the fishermen says her dad loved fishing, rugby and his family. Reese Sanders says Te Awamutu builder Mark Sanders adored his 3 children and will be sorely missed. New Zealanders are being warned that the COVID-19 pandemic is far from over. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says we need to prepare for more Omicron waves and new variants. He says the current Omicron outbreak has now peaked in Metro Auckland and is slowing down at other Auckland DHBs, but COVID is still a threat. Today's update shows nearly 200 people have died during the outbreak, with a further 15 deaths. There are 20,907 new community cases, over 6,000 more than yesterday. The National Party says a new report shows mental health services haven't kept up with demand. The Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission's monitoring report has found improvements have failed to materialise despite significant investment. The Health Minister, Andrew Little, acknowledges pressure on specialist services is increasing. He's allotting $77 million to create 500 training spaces for mental health nurses. Chinese state media says no survivors have been found in the scattered wreckage of a China Eastern Airlines Boeing passenger jet that crashed. 132 people were on board, including passengers and crew. And Mount Ruapehu locals are unfazed by an increased risk of volcanic activity. There have been strong tremors and the volcano's lake is heating up. The Tsukino Mountain Clubs Association says it's business as usual as they prepare for the ski season. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It is time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona, rising inflation has knocked consumer confidence to its lowest point since the global financial crisis in 2008. Well, you're coming in hot, aren't you, Nona? What are the numbers?
Yeah, it's going to be as a result of rising fuel and food prices are just part of the reason why people are feeling a bit downbeat. The confidence index, that's the Westpac McDermott Miller Consumer Confidence Index for the March quarter, fell 7 points to 92.1. So 100 suggests optimism. So anything below is pessimistic. Also, the number of respondents who thought it was a good time to purchase a major household item is also a key measure of consumer sentiment, and it fell also 7 points to a net negative 6.9%, and that's the lowest reading in 14 years. So some groups felt more concerned than others. Young people, they were definitely feeling a drop in confidence, a 15.2 point drop, so that's quite significant for younger people between the ages of 18 and 29, but also for those on the other end, the older New Zealanders who are on fixed incomes. They're really worried that they're going to be a lot worse off financially over last year. So, yeah, overall, it's not a very positive outlook, that's for sure.
And on that note, Nona, COVID-19, the challenges are dragging down the warehouses, or have dragged down the warehouses' first half profit. What did it make?
It made a $50.4 million, and that's versus $55 million. That's a drop of 4.3%. However, the market and the company itself had been expecting a far worse result, and as a sort of something about maybe 5 to 10 million more down than that. So they ended up, the share price ended up more than 4% today. So despite it being a poor result, if you looked at it from a perspective of a drop of 4.3%, it was seen as a positive. And overall, the group's stores did fairly well. Torpedo 7 most especially, but also their online sales brand, themarket.com, also did very well. The second half, they're not making any promises there. They're saying that the Omicron is keeping shopper numbers down in store. And so overall, they're expecting that to be a bit difficult, particularly with the ongoing challenges of supply chain disruptions and, of course, the word inflation.
And how is the market looking today?
You know, not too bad. We closed up 0.2%. That's a gain of 27 points to 12,205. The New Zealand dollar was just steady at 68.9 US cents, 93 Australian, and 52.4. But just to finish off, I just wanted to say that the oil, Brent crude oil prices, which is our benchmark price, it rose almost 3% to $118 US a barrel there. So watch out. The fuel prices are going up still.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, that's Nona Peltier with Business News. The words Delta and Omicron are as common as bread and butter these days, but what about their lesser-known offspring, Deltacron? It's a mash-up of the two viruses that's been detected in the United States and Europe. So should we be worried about it reaching our shores? Well, first off, evolutionary virologist Dr. Gemma Geoghegan explains the unholy union.
It's an example of virus recombination. So virus recombination is when two related viruses infect the same individual and in the same cell during a co-infection. So that's a person is unlucky enough to be infected by two different variants of the same virus. And the virus replication machinery kind of accidentally switches from one genome to the other, resulting in a mixed genome. So that's called viral recombination.
So it's a mash-up, in ordinary people's terms, basically, of the two viruses.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So the thing, what you have just described seems to be, wow, is it statistically tiny for this to occur?
Actually, viral recombination is an important mechanism for viruses to generate genetic variation. And this coronavirus has been doing it all the way through this pandemic. However, it's only recently become easier to spot since viruses that are circulating now are becoming more genetically distinct from one another. So, for example, we now have Delta, but we also have BA1 and BA2, which are variations of Omicron, and they're all circulating, causing infections. So now when recombinants occur between these lineages, it's possible to identify, even if that switched part of the genome is quite small. And other reasons why we're seeing a lot of it now is because when BA1 took off, at least it spread across Europe really rapidly, as well as the US. There was really high levels of Delta already there. And so there's so many opportunities there for these people to get co-infected and then recombine and transmit onwards.
I suppose bottom line, people are going to want to know, how worried should they be about this? Because we know that Omicron is a big spreader and we also know that Delta was super nasty. Do you expect the worst elements of these two viruses in a combination, or how bad is it?
Well, they fall into two categories. So one that's been detected is a mashup between Delta and BA1, and that's often referred to Deltacron, but it's quite unhelpful to do that because there's other versions of that too. But then there's also a recombinant that's been detected, which is a mashup of BA1 and BA2. Now, the one that people might be more concerned about is it's given the name XD, which is basically a name for Delta and BA1. It's first detected in France, and it contains a spike protein of BA1 and the rest of the genome of Delta. And it's been now found in Germany, in the Netherlands, and Denmark. And because it contains the structural proteins of Delta, if any of these different recombinants were to act much differently, it could be this one. But generally, viral recombinants like these should be closely monitored for signs that they might be increasing in frequency, so we can kind of understand if these recombinants induce changes to the virus's transmissibility or disease severity or, in fact, immune escape.
And when you talk about BA1 and BA2, they are different versions of Omicron you're speaking of.
Yeah, that's right. So when Omicron first emerged and it was first noted in southern parts of Africa, there was actually several different variants or sublineages or subvariants of Omicron, and they've all been given the sort of Greek letter Omicron, but they're actually quite distinct. And in New Zealand, we have BA1 and BA2 widely circulating. And of course, it was reported just the other week that BA2 is now increasing in frequency. And that's what we're seeing in the genomes. About 80% of genomes now that are sequenced are BA2.
So do we know if this mashup between Delta and Omicron is here in New Zealand yet?
We haven't yet detected that here in New Zealand. It's been detected in parts of the UK and around Europe as well. It is relatively rare, especially among a general background of BA2 increasing everywhere. However, we need to closely monitor these, and we need to continue our genomic surveillance to then be able to identify this if it occurs in New Zealand.
And is that so you can keep an eye on the characteristics and you know whether to be worried about it or not?
That's right. It's not clear whether or not we need to be worried about it or not yet, but we definitely need to continue this genomic surveillance to see whether or not it's something that we need to be worried about. And of course, there's going to be future variants, not just recombinants, emerging soon as well.
Yeah, because that's the thing, Gemma. People will be listening to this and think, oh, I've had a guts full of this already. Could it just not please go away? Is this going to keep happening? Are we just going to be holding our breath every time two of these viruses get together, so to speak?
I think for the foreseeable future, we can expect new variants, if not recombinants, to emerge. And that's basically evolution. It's happening in real time in front of our eyes, which is it's daunting but quite fascinating.
And that's Dr. Gemma Geoghegan. Now, a lot of you have been getting in touch about the issue of vaccines, and also Prime Minister making an announcement tomorrow about what's happening with mandates, vaccine passes and the COVID framework. This listener says they aren't getting the shots because it isn't mandated. Vanessa from Auckland says no to a booster shot. In fact, she says many of us have had first 2 shots as our support for the wider community, but I do not plan to have any boosters. We've done our part. Now we have to be able to get on with living freely. And this one from another person who says, I've had all 3 shots and I am recovering from COVID. Without the vaccine, I would not be here. Keep them coming. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at checkpointrnz. Ukraine's president says the country will never surrender its cities to Russia. Fighting has reached the city centre of the besieged Mariupol as hundreds of thousands of civilians remain trapped there. The capital, Kiev, continues to face consistent shelling and enters a new curfew, while Russian forces have started their attack on the port city of Odessa. World Watch's Polina Lau reports.
Ukraine will never bow to ultimatums. Ukraine's President Zelensky's strong resolve as the war heads towards its 26th day. Moscow had offered safe passage for people out of the besieged Mariupol, but only on a condition of surrender. President Zelensky says the major cities will not accept Russian occupation. A key port city, Mariupol, has been excluded as a humanitarian corridor. Russia has been trying to take the city since the war began. There's no power or clean water, and food is running low, and hundreds of thousands of civilians are still trapped there.
We have been in a basement for 11 days. This is the 25th day of war. We've been counting every one of them. We hope for the best, to live as humans. The apartment has been broken. Everything is broken. For now, we have some food and some firewood. In a week, we will have nothing, no food at all.
The city is being described as an apocalyptic wasteland. Local commanders say the death toll in Mariupol has now passed 3,000, but the true figure may be higher as many bodies have been buried in mass graves. Russia denies targeting civilians in the war. It blames Ukraine for the situation in Mariupol. Here's a spokesperson for the Kremlin.
Humanitarian corridors are being organised. All the claims that Russia is surrounding cities and not allowing people to leave are lies, as you can understand. It's absolute lies. Our military forces are providing the humanitarian corridors, but people can't use them as those nationalists don't let them.
Ukraine and the US have accused Russia of war crimes in Mariupol as heavy fighting reaches the city centre. Ukraine's Defence Minister, Oleksiy Reznikov, has praised the resistance. Here's his assessment on the impact of the war.
In 25 days of the full-scale aggression, Kremlin has already killed 150 Ukrainian children, destroyed more than 400 schools and kindergartens, and more than 110 hospitals. Thousands and thousands of civilians were killed.
In the capital, Kiev, a new curfew has come into effect, which will last until Wednesday night. At least 8 people have died in shelling on a residential and shopping area. Russia claims it was being used as a reloading station by Ukrainian forces, despite no evidence. Here's the mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko.
Right now, it's 11 schools, 5 kindergartens destroyed, civilian buildings. It's a war against civilians. It's a war against Ukraine, Ukraine as nation. It's war, it's drama. Drama for Ukraine is drama for all Europe.
The port city of Odessa has been attacked for the first time by Russian forces, according to Ukrainian officials. With control over the access to the Black Sea, Odessa is a hugely strategic target. Russian forces are expected to hit supply lines, logistics and air bases, followed by cities they feel they need to own. But they're still running into Ukrainian resistance and have escalated the use of weapons. The US has confirmed Russia used hypersonic missiles, which fly at 5 times the speed of sound and are difficult for defence missile systems to shoot down. President Zelensky says he's ready to speak directly to Vladimir Putin.
I think we have to use any format, any chance, in order to have a possibility of negotiating, a possibility of talking to Putin. But if these attempts fail, that would mean that this is a third world war.
US President Joe Biden will travel to Europe later this week to meet with allies to discuss further sanctions on Russia.
An urgent investigation has been ordered by Chinese President Xi Jinping into what caused a plane crash on a hillside in the country's south. 132 passengers and crew were on board and there are no signs of survivors. CNN's Pete Muntean has more.
New video shows one of the world's most popular jetliners dropping from the sky. Security images obtained by state-owned television show China Eastern Airlines Flight 5735 plunging straight down into the mountains of southern China. Data from Flight Radar 24 shows minutes after leveling off at a cruising altitude of 29,000 feet, the Boeing 737 began a rapid dive, losing more than 25,000 feet in less than 2 minutes. China state media says all 132 people on board were killed.
This is what they would have heard in the cockpit as they...
Retired airline pilot Mark Weiss teaches in this Boeing 737 simulator. He notes the plane in question was a Boeing 737-800, which lacks the technology behind the crashes of the 737 MAX.
It's probably one of the safest airplanes ever built. This was the model before the MAX. And that did not have the MCAS system in it.
Even though people hear 737.
Apples and oranges. Same airplane, different problem.
What was supposed to be a less than 2-hour flight from Kunming to Guangzhou crashed in heavy forest, making access for rescuers difficult. Witnesses say they saw no smoke coming from the jetliner until it hit the ground. The 737-800 is the second most common airliner in the world. There are more than 4,500 worldwide, including almost 800 in the United States. China Eastern Airlines is now grounding its entire 737-800 fleet.
The early evidence is very ominous. I'm afraid the early evidence on this accident, they say there's points that you're going to do a hard look at the flight crew.
Doctors broke the rules for prescribing a safe sex drug during last year's lockdowns to ensure people had access to it. Pharmac received advice 18 months ago suggesting a change to the prescription requirements, but those changes haven't been made. The drug is known as PrEP, which can reduce the risk of being infected with HIV by 99%. Jake McKee reports.
PrEP is funded in 3-month supplies, but among Pharmac's requirements is that the patient must have had casual, unprotected male-to-male receptive sex in the previous 3 months. Multiple doctors have spoken anonymously to RNZ about breaking the rules around prescribing PrEP without meeting that guideline. That includes during lockdown restrictions last year, particularly when Auckland had more than 3 consecutive months of restrictions, which meant users were technically ineligible for renewed supply. Figures given to RNZ under the Official Information Act show national PrEP use dropped during this time. One Auckland-based GP, who when naming Dr. A, thought the current rules made patients feel unfairly shamed because they have to detail their sexual history. Their comments have been revoiced.
It's like going to the doctor and saying, "Hey, yeah, I need to confess I'm a slut. Please give me the pills." I just think it's a bit of a roadblock, really.
Doctors are also required to complete a special authority form. Dr. A says they disregard the form because it takes time and they have better things to talk about with patients.
Like, making sure that they're safe and also making sure that we're also screening for all the other things as well.
Pharmac does have a waiver form around this that can take up to 5 days to be approved, but no doctors spoken to by RNZ knew about it. Another GP, whose comments have also been revoiced, says the waiver looks complicated.
It obviously wasn't communicated widely or well. Why would you bother with it?
This all comes as Pharmac continues to look at changing the eligibility requirements for funded PrEP, which would include looking at future risk of unprotected sex as opposed to past behaviour. Mark Fisher, the Executive Director of HIV peer support organisation Body Positive, says it just needs to happen because it's a really minor change.
We can't keep having barriers for people to access PrEP. If people have the courage to ask for PrEP, there's a reason that they've got to that point, and if we put barriers in, then they won't come back and access it.
In a statement, Pharmac's Chief Medical Officer David Hughes says medical professionals are relied on using their best judgment when prescribing PrEP. Dr Hughes says Pharmac does audit special authorities from time to time. He says a review into widened access of PrEP is underway, but it must be balanced within a fixed budget.
You could say it's been a hairy few days at Auckland Zoo. Just as the black clouds were rolling in and the lightning was about to strike, a baby was born. It's orangutan mum, Milua, and dad Charlie's second baby, and despite yesterday's storm, all is going well for the new addition to the family. Auckland Zoo curator of mammals, Amy Robbins, has known Milua a long time, and she joins us now. Kia ora, Amy. How cute is this new baby?
Hi. Oh, my goodness. This baby is pretty adorable. It's actually the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life, to be honest.
And so what's it been up to since it's been born? How are they getting on?
Yeah, so mum and baby are doing really, really well. Everything's going really smoothly and really positive. Baby's got a really strong grip reflex, which is one of the things that we look for in the signs of it for a healthy infant. And also baby's got a really good suckling reflex as well. So it's been nursing really well and really strongly and frequently, and Milua's just doing all the right things, holding it in the right place and just being super attentive. It's really nice to see.
It was a hell of a storm. So are they outside, inside, or, you know, I know you've got the high wire there, as I like to refer to it. Have they been up on that?
Not in the last couple of days. All Milua wants to do is just make a big nest and stay in bed, so we're just respecting that, and she has the choice whether she wants to go inside or outside. Charlie has been outside. He likes his vitamin D, likes getting some sunshine, so he's been out and kind of going back in and checking on Milua and baby and then heading back out again. But we did open up today for the first time for Milua since the baby was born on Sunday, but she said no thanks, and she chose to stay inside in her nest.
But if she does want to go out and up, Amy, I'm just curious, the baby at that age, is it strong enough to hold on to mum's back, or what happens?
Yeah, so for the first little while, baby actually clings to the front of a mum, and orangutans have long hair, so that gives baby something to grip onto. And they've got, as I said, he's really healthy and got a really strong grip reflex, and so we wouldn't be too concerned about putting them up on the aerial pathways in the next few weeks or so. But until we know that baby is healthy and Milua is confident and competent being out in the habitat and in the trees and moving around with baby, then we'll go to that next step and give access to the aerial pathways.
And you don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet? How long before you do know?
Well, we do have an inkling.
What's your inkling? Come on.
Well, our inkling is male, but we, because we're leaving them to it, we don't want to kind of be in her face all the time. So we do want to make sure that we've got it right before we make an official announcement.
And who names it?
We think the primate team will have that honour, we think. We'd really like to honour sort of the Indonesian heritage of where orangutans come from. We'd also possibly like to try and honour Winita, our elderly orangutan, who we lost recently in some way. So we're just trying to come up with some potential names at the moment, but we do like to wait a little while and just see what sort of personality the baby has before we give them a name.
Absolutely. So, Amy, if people are at the zoo in the next couple of days, there's a chance they could see the new baby?
There is a chance, yes. We don't want people to get their hopes up too much because it is Milua's choice entirely and the weather forecast isn't amazing. But she is becoming sort of stronger. She's had a lot of rest today and yesterday. And so as long as there's some sunshine, then she should want to go out for a short period at least.
Thanks for that, Amy. That is Amy Robbins, who's Auckland Zoo curator of mammals. And do go online and check out the pictures. It is the cutest little thing you have ever seen. After spending 6 years in an Iranian prison, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe has spoken publicly for the first time since her dramatic return to the UK last week. Ms Radcliffe says it shouldn't have taken the government so long to secure her release. The BBC's Caroline Hawley reports.
Out of the darkness, into the spotlight. For 6 long years she was silenced. It was her husband who spoke for her, went on hunger strike for her. But today at last, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe herself got to have her say. She began with some important thank yous.
My amazing husband who has been tirelessly campaigning for me, so thank you so much. And my daughter for being very, very patient with mummy to be coming home. So I am so grateful.
Nazanin flew home in the early hours of Thursday morning, along with another British national, Anusha Ashuri, after the UK repaid a long overdue military debt. But she wasn't keen to give the government any credit today.
I have seen 5 foreign secretaries changed over the course of 6 years. That is unprecedented given the politics of the UK. I love you, Richard. Respect whatever you believe. But I was told many, many times that, oh, we're going to get you home. That never happened. So there was a time that I felt like, do you know what? I'm not even going to trust you because I've been told many, many times that I'm going to be taken home. But that never happened. I mean, how many foreign secretaries does it take for someone to come home? 5. It should have been one of them eventually. So now here we are. What's happened now should have happened 6 years ago. I always felt like I am holding this black hole in my heart all these years. But I'm just going to leave that black hole on the plane when the plane lands. I'm not going to live for the rest of my life with a grudge over the past 6 years.
So for some of your feedback now, and this is on an interview done earlier in the programme by our reporter Nick Trubich, who spoke to the Sanders children. They're the children of Mark Sanders, who was killed in the fishing tragedy. The Sanders story was the saddest, but from the sound of them, it did convey that his spirit remains well and truly alive in his articulate, beautifully loving kids.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou, ko Aviation tēnei. Search crews have found the body of the 5th person who was missing following the Far North fishing charter tragedy. Police say the man's body was retrieved this afternoon by a boat that was helping the search effort. 10 people were on board the charter boat Enchanter when it sank off North Cape during a storm on Sunday night. Search Mission Coordinator Nick Burt told Checkpoint today's search has been a huge effort.
Today we've had 4 helicopters up there, including the Westpac Rescue helicopter from Auckland. We've had the Coast Guard Air Patrol involved. We've had 3 commercial fishing vessels assisting. We've got police both on the ground and the National Dive Squad out on the water. And we have a Coast Guard vessel out of Hohora as well.
5 people, including the skipper, survived, but 5 others have lost their lives. The government's promised drop in public bus and train fares will kick in on April the 1st and will last for 3 months. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern last week announced public transport fares would be halved and petrol taxes cut in response to soaring fuel prices. Road user charges will also be cut by 36% across all rates from late April until late July at an estimated cost of $170 million. The Transport Minister, Michael Wood, says the support package will make a real difference to families struggling with rising costs. An epidemiologist says apart from the healthcare sector, vaccine passes may not be necessary once the current Omicron outbreak passes. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, will make an announcement tomorrow about vaccine passes, mandates and the COVID-19 protection framework. Michael Baker has told Checkpoint if vaccine passes are to remain, they need to have the 3rd dose or booster recorded in order to be of any use.
I'm not certain that it should be compulsory in many environments at all, except healthcare environments. But I do think we need a tool so that when you need to limit transmission of the virus in a particular indoor environment, it's there if it's needed.
The government has indicated mandates and passes will no longer be as necessary when the current wave of infections has peaked, which health officials believe has now happened. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has again called for direct talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin to try to put an end to the fighting. But Mr. Zelensky says such a meeting is unlikely to lead to an agreement on longer-term issues, such as security or constitutional changes. A Ukrainian negotiator says there'll be no compromises on territorial integrity or sovereignty. The BBC's Lise Doucette has more.
President Zelensky has asked repeatedly to meet President Putin. I remember even before this began, when one world leader after another was speaking to President Putin, President Zelensky says, "Why are you not talking to me?" He says, even if there is a 1% chance of ending this war, I will take it. But we hear from the Turkish and the Israeli mediators, the time is not right. And that is the message we also hear from Russia.
The head of the Mental Health Foundation says he would have been shocked if a new report didn't find major issues with the country's mental health services. The Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission has found long wait times for specialist support, more prescriptions being handed out for antidepressants, and more Māori being put into solitary confinement. Sean Robinson says it's a sign that the $1.9 billion the government set aside in the 2019 wellbeing budget to transform services just wasn't enough. He says officials are only just comprehending the size of the issue. It's business as usual around Mount Ruapehu, despite an increased risk of volcanic activity. The mountain has been at volcanic alert level 2 since yesterday, after strong tremors were detected and the lake's temperature rose. The Tsukino Mountain Clubs Association says it won't worry unless the volcano stays at level 2 for some time. Its safety services manager, Bruce McGregor, says the association is gearing up for the ski season.
Well, I mean, we're living it on every day of the year, and it sits there, and occasionally it does its thing. I mean, it's like living anywhere in New Zealand. We're on the ring of fire. I mean, we could have a major earthquake anywhere.
Meanwhile, Ruapehu District Mayor Don Cameron says he has full confidence in the local civil defence. And one person has died at the scene of a serious crash at Upper Moutere in the Tasman district this afternoon. Police say a number of other people have serious or moderate injuries. They were called to the 3-vehicle crash near the intersection of Gardner Valley Road and the Coastal Highway shortly before 4 o'clock. The road will remain closed while the serious crash unit examines the scene. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp samples a new album from 80s heavyweights Tears for Fears. Trevor Riki's got another package of past WOMAD highlights to make up for no WOMAD Taranaki in 2022. And 30 years after Francis Fukuyama proclaimed history was over, our largely libertarian thinker Eric Crampton assesses its comeback and where to next for liberal democracies in the light of Russia's attack on Ukraine. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next, but right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, a few showers, some are possibly heavy and thundery at times. Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Gisborne, cloudy with showers but rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in Gisborne, spreading elsewhere this evening. From Waikato to Taranaki, including Taumarunui, cloudy periods and a few showers, possible thunderstorms for Taranaki and the west coast. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, also Whanganui, and from Taihape to Wellington, partly cloudy with scattered showers mainly about the ranges. A few showers tomorrow, but rain with heavy falls for Hawke's Bay. Scattered rain for Nelson, heavy and thundery at times, easing tomorrow evening. Marlborough, Bulla and Westland, scattered showers in the north, developing elsewhere this afternoon. Canterbury, Otago, Southland and Fiordland, low cloud and patchy drizzle in the east, but fine in the south and west. Scattered showers during the afternoons and evenings, mainly inland. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, often cloudy. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6. We'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Investigators are piecing together how a China Eastern plane nosedived on its way from Kunming City to Guangzhou. 130 people were on board the Boeing 737-800 when it plummeted into a mountainous area near the city of Wuzhou. There's no sign of life among the scattered debris. Aviation commentator Irene King joins me now. Irene, how would you describe what happened to this plane?
Pretty unusual. Aircraft don't fall out of the sky in our present environment. Certainly, they simply do not fall out of the sky the way this one did.
So what does the data show about the final few minutes of the flight?
A rapid acceleration. I mean, it's just nosediving down into the ground. and there's a slight recovery, but then it just continues its trajectory. I mean, it was at speed and virtually vertical. It's quite awesome looking at the video in lots of respects.
With that severe decline, what are the potential scenarios?
Yeah, there's quite a few. Like, what we do know is that the aircraft was flying lower by about 5,000 feet from the normal flight path of every other aircraft that had flown that route during the week. So whether that's a factor or not, who knows? But, what you look at typically in these scenarios, was it a bomb? And no, you can discount that by looking at the photos because, there was, when there's an internal explosion, you can, the metal of the aircraft is simply differently shaped. And we know that it was largely, there were some very chunky bits of aircraft which survived the accident. So we then looked, was it operator-induced error? And that means, did the pilots mismanage something on the aircraft, or dare I say it, were there human factors going on board the aircraft, or was there some untoward entry onto the flight deck, aka terrorism? So those sorts of things go through your mind, and then you sort of start to look at it's such an unusual accident. You start to look at, what is the performance of the aircraft and what was it, precisely what caused it to go into this massive, downward trajectory. It's just so unusual. The good thing is that they will be able to get the black boxes quite quickly because it's in a very compact area. They may well be buried, under ground. But it's in a compact area and it's not over water, so they will be able to get the black boxes quite quickly, and the data on those black boxes will hold, I anticipate the key to what we know on.
Irene, obviously China Eastern has grounded its similar planes in the same plane, Boeing 737-800s. Is there any warning to other airlines who are flying this particular plane, or any reason why they should keep them on the ground in the meantime?
Look, I think because it's so unusual, this accident, I think they've taken a very precautionary stance. Like China Eastern is incredibly safe. It is all forms of aviation in China. It is a very safe jurisdiction, and they fly very modern Western aircraft. So I think they're just taking a very precautionary stance. There are a lot of these aircraft in operation at the present time, and I just think because it's such an unusual accident, I think any reputable carrier would take the stance that they have. That doesn't mean to say that the rest of the globe need to take the same stance. It's just to protect their own reputation.
Ngā mihi, Irene. Thanks for joining us. That is aviation commentator Irene King. Locals living near Mount Ruapehu appear unfazed by the signs of elevated volcanic unrest, despite the recent strong tremors and the lake heating up. Mount Ruapehu's volcanic alert level has been raised to level 2, but our reporter Kirsty Frame says locals are more concerned about the impact of COVID on their community than a potential volcanic eruption.
All eyes are on Mount Ruapehu right now, and District Mayor Don Cameron is keeping a keen watch.
Don't worry, I'm checking to make sure there's no smoke coming out of the crater because we're right underneath it.
He says it's not the first time and definitely won't be the last time locals are around for the volcano to heat up. He thinks back to 1995 and 96 when Mount Ruapehu started a series of spectacular eruptions. Mayor Cameron says those blasts forced an economic reset for many areas as visitors stayed away. But Mount Ruapehu's eruption 15 years ago had quite the opposite effect.
From 2007 when we had that Laha it really had no economic effect other than having to strengthen the bridge across the Volcano River, which needed to be done anyway. Certainly didn't affect tourism. In fact, there was a flush of tourism of people just interested in what was going on.
Mayor Cameron says their region's civil defence is up to an incredibly high standard.
The alerts go through to our civil defence people as well, and they keep in touch with GNS. Between them, they decide then we may need to take some action. And it's more around making sure that people are out of line of a possible eruption.
And that confidence seems to be shared by locals who aren't too worried about the increased volcano alert level yet. Ruapehu Alpine Lift said its summer operations are not impacted by the increased volcanic alert level. All its lifts, including the Skywalker gondola, are located well outside the precautionary zone. And while it's not ski season yet, the Tokino Mountain Clubs Association, nestled on the eastern slopes of Mount Ruapehu, won't worry unless the volcano stays at level 2 for some time. Its Safety Services Manager, Bruce McGregor, says they're business as usual.
Well, I mean, we're living it on every day of the year. And, it sits there and, occasionally it does its thing. I mean, it's like living anywhere in New Zealand. We're on the ring of fire. I mean, we could have a major earthquake anywhere.
The Ruapehu Chateau inside Tongariro National Park hasn't had a flood of people cancelling their trips either. Much of the Tongariro crossing track is operating as normal, with a 2-kilometre radius of the crater now off limits. Local district councillor and Owakuni business owner Janelle Hitch says the risk of an eruption is always in the back of locals' minds.
Yeah, without kind of negating the power of the volcano, because obviously, it's always in the back of your mind, but it is definitely not a dominating concern at this time.
Councillor Hinch says the community and their businesses are resilient.
People from the Ruapehu district have learnt to be very resilient, as most of our businesses rely on the weather. So it doesn't matter if you're in tourism or farming, what happens from the skies and from the earth is make or break for your business.
Councillor Hinch says COVID has had a harder impact on the community than volcanic activity in recent years. But like the district mayor, Janelle agrees, the council civil defence is up to scratch and locals know the risks.
It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. There's twice as many properties on the market and the ball's now in the buyer's court, according to the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand. CoreLogic's House Price Index, which measures the changing value of property, rose 0.8% last month, a sharp drop on January's 2.1% growth rate, the lowest price growth since September 2020. I asked Jen Baird from the Real Estate Institute how hard the market's being hit.
Look, it's a really interesting time in the market at the moment. We've got both supply and demand changes. So there is a lot more property on the market, so a lot more choice for buyers. And what we're seeing from buyers is that they are now starting to take their time. One of the reasons they're taking their time is that it's taking them longer to line up their financial ducks, largely thanks to the triple CFA.
Right, so have you got the perfect storm here? Interest rates are up, credit is not as easy as it has been to get, and, do the buyers now have the upper hand, though, in terms of not having to rush?
Look, I definitely think buyers are in a position now where they don't have to rush. If you look back to the middle of last year, we've now got about twice as many properties on the market as we did back then, when things were really pressurised for buyers and they needed to move quite quickly. I guess the double whammy, if you will, is that there's now all of those pressures on buyers in regards to their finance and how much those mortgages are going to cost them now into the next few years, which is slowing down the demand side of things a little bit as well.
So what does that mean for everybody?
Well, we're in this time in the market when things change, where everybody takes a bit of a breath and there's usually a bit of a pause. So the numbers are a little volatile and we will see those settle into a trend over the coming months. But right now, we're really at that point of change And so people are adjusting to the market. So from a vendor's perspective, really staying on the ball, having those conversations about exactly what's happening in your market today, and that will be different across the country. And for buyers, well, they just get to take their time at the moment, but there is absolutely still lots of properties being sold and people making those property decisions for the life that they want to live.
So, Jen, in plain speak, are the prices going down?
We've seen the prices come off their peaks in November, but come off just a little bit. So we haven't seen anything near a significant drop in prices at the moment. It remains to be seen what happens over the next few months.
So what are the flow-on effects for the workforce, for real estate agents? Because we've got the impression that a lot of people went into this business when the times were good. So what's happening with the workforce now?
Look, it's definitely an attractive place to work when things are moving very quickly. But what's happening at the moment is just a readjustment. People who've been in the market for a long time will just see this as the real estate cycle. It happens, it's always happened, and the conversation changes. And this is the time when real estate agents really come into their own in terms of the conversations with vendors. For new people, it's about learning from those old hands, but adjusting the conversations that you're having to continue to build your business.
Are people leaving the profession, some of the people who are newer to it?
Look, I haven't heard that we're seeing lots of people leaving the profession. It is a tough business to be in. In terms of people that come in the first few years, it takes time to get up on the skis, and sometimes those people do choose to leave. Haven't heard about it yet. One of the challenges that we're looking out for, though, is the very low unemployment rates. And these people are teachers and ex-policemen and builders and all of those sorts of things who are still very much in demand in the market in general. So low unemployment is a challenge in our market as well.
And there were some predictions that potentially up to 30% of those in this profession could peel off over a period of time. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's an interesting prediction. We do have churn in the market, and when things get challenging, some people do make other choices that better suit the life that they want to lead. But we're not hearing that there's a whole lot of people looking to leave the market at this point. Look, it's a really interesting...
And that's Jen Baird from the Real Estate Institute. The Ukrainian capital, Kiev, is under a new curfew until Wednesday night. The city has been hit by several large explosions and 8 people are known to have died. The BBC's Orla Guerin reports from the outskirts of Kiev.
CCTV cameras caught the Russian attack that lit the night sky. In the darkness, emergency services pick their way through the ruins. From the rubble, hands emerge, trembling, and a survivor is pulled to safety. But 8 people were killed here in the latest attack on the capital. And this is what's left of the Retroville shopping centre. There are indications that the Ukrainian military had a presence here. The scale of the destruction is absolutely immense and spread over a wide area, surrounded by apartment blocks. There could be a lot more of this ahead for Kiev. Russian forces are not inside the city, but they can hit hard from the outside. How are you feeling about the future here now in Kiev?
I don't know now, but I don't want to leave Kiev.
You want to stay?
Yeah, it's my home.
Even though things are so dangerous now?
I know, but dangerous all Ukraine, all city.
But the key city, the key target, is Kiev. And in the forests on the outskirts, its defenders are preparing for battle. These territorial defence recruits now training for urban combat. Their instructor is a Georgian who fought the Russians during the war in his homeland in 2008. The concern here is not that Russia can surround or capture Kiev, but that it may avenge itself on the city.
I'm not sure that they will be able to besiege Kiev because it is a very long city with a lot of defense and it would be really hard to encircle it. But what I really do afraid is that out of weakness, out of despair, because they're losing this war, they will destroy it as much as possible because of hate.
Then time to get into position behind the sniper sights. Alex has been a hunter since boyhood. He is unflinching and unapologetic about his new wartime role, hunting the enemy.
It's our motherland and we must defend it. And in this case, I think it's no difference between animals, which I try to shoot, and the animals which come here to kill our people, kill our children, destroy our buildings and destroy our life at all.
What's ahead for Ukrainian forces may be a war of attrition for the capital. Defence officials in the UK expect Russia to try to encircle the city in the coming weeks.
All Whites striker Chris Wood has shot to the top of the New Zealand all-time goal-scoring list. Wood's 2 goals in the dominant win over Fiji at the Oceania Football World Cup qualifiers today saw the 30-year-old break a long-standing record. Felicity Reid reports.
He's the outright leader now, Chris Wood. 2 on the night for New Zealand, and he makes it 3-0.
Chris Wood's record-breaking 30th goal for New Zealand came 12 years after his first. In his 62nd appearance for the All Whites, Wood surpassed the tally set by Vaughan Coveney. This time he didn't celebrate in his undies like he did with his first against Honduras in 2010. Wood, who recently joined English Premier League side Newcastle United, reckons he's matured and says reaching new heights for New Zealand has been on his mind.
It means a lot. I mean, it's something that I've sought after for a very long time as a dream as a kid, trying to get to it. So to break it is fantastic, and I hope I can add a few more goals to it over the course of my career.
Coveney, who played 64 times for New Zealand between 1992 and 2006, is now coaching in Australia and still closely follows the All Whites in Wood's career in England. Coveney isn't surprised Wood was the one to end his reign as leading goalscorer, and he says he's ecstatic he has.
It's not easy to get away from your club team and come and play for your country. So what he's achieved over his career looks great, and I hope he continues to bang them in again.
The 4-0 win over Fiji this morning seals the All Whites spot in the semi-finals of the Oceania tournament with a game to spare. Coach Danny Hay says the result will allow him to tinker with the squad for the final group game against New Caledonia on Friday.
Very pleased to get the result. I thought at times the quality of the football performance was really, really good. Obviously, we would have liked to have been a little more clinical, particularly in that first half. That said, really pleased with being able to give multiple players game time.
The All Whites play their semi-final a week from now. A win in the final of the Oceania qualifiers on March 31st would see the New Zealanders back in Qatar in June to play off against the 4th-placed CONCACAF side, likely to be either Costa Rica or Panama, for a place at the World Cup at the same venue later this year. The last time the All Whites qualified for the World Cup was in 2010.
After being largely cut off from the rest of the world as part of its COVID response, Hong Kong is starting to ease restrictions. It's removing the ban on flights to 9 countries, including Australia, the UK and the US. And the change has seen people leaving Hong Kong in droves. CNN's Christy Lou Stout reports.
Literally driven away. Thousands of Hong Kong residents have had enough. Unable to endure life in a city which has become one of the most isolated in the world. As other countries are largely learning to live with the virus, people here are fleeing the still oppressive COVID restrictions, and they're leaving by the thousands. Even as they're on their way out, these residents asked us to hide their identities.
I think Hong Kong used to be one of the best places to be in every single aspect in general. And now it's losing a lot of the edge of this advantage.
If we don't leave, nothing will change. You cannot change the government,
They are leaving as the city is in the midst of a fifth wave and quickly running out of hospital beds. New isolation facilities are being built to house the thousands of positive cases. Hong Kong's rule that all positive cases must quarantine in a government facility like this has been pushed to the limit by the rapidly spreading Omicron variant. That same rule proved a nightmare for Laura and Nick. We talked to them back in February when their toddler was taken from them after testing positive for COVID.
Just traumatic. Heartbreaking.
Just one example of the pain people across the city have had to endure. 11-month-old Ava was reunited with the parents after our report. Despite the strict measures, the city is struggling to curb the number of deaths. Storage for dead bodies are at capacity and coffins are in short supply. Professor John Nichols at the University of Hong Kong blames the deaths on the city's lag in vaccinating its elderly, and that while the zero COVID strategy worked in the past, it is no longer tenable.
The question is how much the techniques which worked well in mainland China can actually be applied to Hong Kong in 2022.
Many in Hong Kong are questioning why they've had to live through such harsh restrictions just for things to end like this. Like Alan, who's been running this gym for 6 years. If the city doesn't open up soon, he says his business will be dead within weeks.
I feel lonely and sad when every time I come to this gym without seeing the people here. And I look at the ground, everything just live on the ground. I just miss it all the time.
Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam finally seems to be acknowledging the damage her China-led COVID policy has done to the economy and the people. On Monday, she announced the city will ease some restrictions. While the leadership hopes these changes will bring back the city's vital force, its tough zero COVID policy and the diminished political freedoms are throwing doubts on whether they can turn back the tide. At least to them, it comes all too little, too late.
And we're almost out of time. Just a reminder, the late news team will keep you posted throughout the evening. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi Popo, and tomorrow from 5, in light of the North Cape fishing tragedy. First up looks at what attracts fishers from around the country to the Three Kings Islands. Kaua e wariwari te atatero I a mātou kōrero. Our stories and videos are online. Do check them out, including a wonderful tribute to fisherman Mark Sanders from his 3 children. That will be on our webpage. Kia whai tōpō. Have a great evening. We'll see you again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Aviation tēnei. The search and rescue operation in the far north has ended with the discovery of the 5th body from the sinking of the Enchanter fishing boat. Epidemiologist Michael Baker says the 3rd COVID-19 dose needs to be recorded if vaccine passes remain in use. A 2-year recruitment plan is being launched to train 500 mental health nurses. And the president of World Athletics says the integrity of women's sport is under threat, with the first transgender woman winning